a retired professor, John, at let me get your academia up here, Weber State University, and he's written a whole ton of articles which are available at academia.edu on a cross section of issues. So, John, I'm sure that you could be a regular of mine, going forward because there's just so much here.
That would
But
be nice.
yeah, but today I want to talk about your article about the ACLU, what you call the American Criminal Liberties Union. And let's start with talking about the particular way you got involved with the ACLU, and then we could talk a bit about the history of the ACLU.
Okay, at one time in my career, I had delusions of being a public school teacher. And this particular school I worked for decided that because I wouldn't go back to school and get recertified as a speech therapist, that they didn't need me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I wasn't going back to college was, for one, I had enough college, and for another, I was accepted to the NCO Academy, Non-Commissioned Officers Academy for the Air Force. And my boss said, well, I guess you're telling me the Air Force is more important than we are. And I said, yeah, I guess I am. And that's when I got fired.
Can I just interject here and share a quick thought about this? I recall the late David Brudnoy, who was a great talk show host in Boston that I used to listen to quite often. He was very intellectual, and he was a professor at Boston University. And he said that he was denied the ability to teach at a public school because he hadn't the right certification, and he'd have to go back to college and get all these, jump through all these hoops to teach. But yet he would have been a great teacher for high school. And he said that this is a racket. He said this is a way to keep good people like himself and others, and apparently you, out of teaching in public schools, and that this whole rigmarole of getting certified is just nothing more than a kind of an ideological screening on the part of the public educrats, the National Education Association. It's a moneymaker for them, and it's also a way to make sure that you're goose-stepping on the right side of their political ideas. Anyway, go on.
Right. Yeah, and public schools have become very, very, very political.
Oh, yeah.
More to the left than to the right. Anyway, I thought, well, maybe I could try the ACLU. And I wrote them a letter, explained my case, and they wrote me back and they said, your case doesn't fit our agenda. And I thought, well, what is their agenda? And so I started doing some research into their history, and some of this I got off of their own website. And I found out that when the Communist Party was organized in the United States back in the 1920s, the ACLU was their legal arm. In other words, the ACLU, their agenda was to legalize, I guess, the Communist Party. And
yes,
that the cases they would accept were cases that would push that agenda. Like they supported a case with the KKK. They supported a case involving the neo-Nazis, and I'm thinking, no, I don't want to even get involved with these guys. And so that's how I that's how I initially got involved. And the more research I did, the more I found out that these guys they're a racket, like you say, they're a racket.
Sure.
They have an agenda, and they're going to push that agenda any way they can. And
Let me just comment a little here on what I see as their agenda. They were founded by Roger Baldwin, who was a real left-leaning socialist who had been to the Soviet Union to visit Lenin and who made that pilgrimage and who spoke very praisingly of the Bolsheviks,
right,
and
right,
Helen Gurley Flynn, who was also a
uh huh,
communist and who was basically they had to drop her membership in the late 1920s, I think, because she was so blatantly communist. And that their agenda, I would describe it as Fabian socialist. I mean, they're not calling for like an outright Bolshevik revolution in the
right,
United States. What they do is similar to the Fabian Society of Britain, which was established in the late 19th century and included such people as Beatrice Webb and
George
Morris,
Bernard Shaw,
George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells. And their idea was to slowly transform the society into a socialist or Marxist state by changing the meaning of words and the meaning of laws. In other words, they said, we're going to leave the law in place. We're going to leave the Constitution in place so that everyone relaxes and that no one feels that we're being too radical. But by use of lawsuits, by use of legal legerdemain, by use of propaganda, they would change the meaning of the words in the
right,
Constitution to fit a socialist agenda. I mean, I could give you several examples, like the meaning of the word welfare, which was
mm-hmm.
it's in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution to provide for the general welfare. It didn't mean giving people handouts. It didn't mean giving, take taxpayer money to people who wanted it or who needed it. It meant keeping the peace in a society by maintaining, a system of law and order,
right,
and so they changed the meaning of that term. They changed the meaning of the word, want, or the word, all these. In other words, they use legal means to turn everything over into a socialistic meaning. I mean, we could go through. I mean, there are some real. I mean, in the 1990s, I think you had politicians and media figures like Dan Rather refer to raising taxes as courage, right? In other words,
right,
to have courage meant you're going to gouge more taxes out of people. That's courage.
uh
And
huh,
all of these sort of shorthand transformations of words, either by legal means in the courts or by propaganda from people like Dan Rather and other media figures. And that's what the ACLU is all about. They are a Fabian socialist group that is trying to change the content, not the language, but the content of the law to move the country in a more authoritarian socialist direction.
yeah. I would say that the ACLU uses the Constitution to advance their socialist agenda. They don't overthrow it, but they use, like you said, like the language in the Constitution to move us into a socialist direction and eventually overthrow our way of life.
Yes, it's kind of it's the frog in the petri dish.
Right,
You turn the temperature up just a little bit, over time, so the frog doesn't realize it until by the time the frog wakes up and realizes he's boiling, it's too late because his legs have lost the ability to jump out of the dish. And
right,
that's what they've been doing, and they take a very long lens view. I mean, this is classic Fabianism. They look at things in terms of centuries. They look at in terms of decades and half centuries to bring about their change. That's why the symbol of the Fabian socialist movement is the tortoise. They
oh
move.
really,
Oh yeah, in England where it was founded, they're on a low crawl through society, a
Right.
gradual usurpation of individual rights and all of the institutions that make us free, like the family, like individualism, like faith, religion,
Right.
property, the right to trade goods and services. And they're just our history. We see a culture comp right now in the United States where they're basically stripping apart our history and making us forget it. And it's all done under the guise of almost so you don't even notice it. It's really a very insidious agenda.
Right. Well, uh, now that you mention it, the ACLU has come out and protected some of these socialists and people who were deliberately trying to overthrow the Constitution, overthrow the government, and like you said, they use the meaning of words, they change the meaning of words to advance this socialist agenda. And this tearing down statues, removing the Confederate flag from the public square, all of this is a very insidious move to revise our history and sanitize it for the convenience of the socialists.
It's true. I mean, under the guy, they talk about particularly what I find really irritating is the idea of taking down the statue of Robert E. Lee
Oh
in
yeah,
Richmond. Robert E. Lee was, yes, during the Civil War he was on the wrong side. I mean, that's for sure. However, but what about the spirit of Appomattox? What about the fact that Lee and Grant together represented a kind of a stitching back of the Union and of creating a new way
right.
forward for the United States? And I mean, what about and he was repentant over slavery. I don't think he ever was a supporter of slavery. And this idea that I mean, do we want to really relive the Civil War? Do we really want to refight that? Wasn't there enough people? I mean, 600,000 deaths in that war. I mean, no one's calling for
630 something, I think it's 636,000 if my memory serves me.
right. That's right. I mean, exactly. And it's time. I think after 150 years, I mean, you want to stitch back the Union and reconcile, and that's what
Yeah,
it's been all about. That's what
well,
Robert E. Lee was all about.
if Lincoln could give the South amnesty, then 150 years later, we should honor that.
That's right.
Because in the end, even though these Confederates were fighting against the Union, they still had a cause that they believed in, which was states' rights and slavery. And not to
That's right.
say that that was a good cause, but that was their cause. And in the end, after the Civil War, with Lincoln giving them all amnesty, they're still Americans.
Well,
And we
that's the
should,
point. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, we have to have reconciliation and kind of a moving forward and to go back and relitigate that. And then you have real radicals now saying they want to tear down the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial because they had slaves. I mean,
yeah.
I thought that the President Trump's press secretary, her name is Kayleigh McNamee, I think.
Oh, yeah. I
Boy, is
love
she
her.
good. Yeah, she was asked this question: why doesn't President Trump want to rename military bases that had been named after Confederate generals? And her response was really right on. She said, "Well, I mean, why don't we get rid of the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial? And while we're at it, why don't we get rid of anything referencing Franklin Roosevelt? After all, didn't he create the Japanese internment? And while we're at it, why don't we get rid of the Biden Library? I mean, Joe Biden was a supporter of segregation throughout his
Right.
years in the Senate. We're going to have to get rid of any mention of Biden. So I mean, what a she really came back and knocked them down on the floor.
Oh yeah, she gives
Oh,
as
she's really good.
good as she gets.
And she's a good researcher. She's a lawyer. She has
Right,
she's got her ducks in order when she steps up there. I really admire that. I mean, I hope that she continues to have the kind of fortitude and stomach to deal with
right,
this, the kind of nonstop hatred and the viciousness and the attempt to kind of discredit it any chance they can get. These aren't constructive criticisms. This is just an
right.
attempt to overthrow this government, frankly.
Yeah, basically, I think that's what the whole impeachment thing was about.
Oh,
That
clearly.
Nancy Pelosi, being third in line to the presidency, had investigations going on both Trump and Pence. If she
Oh, they're
could
still
get
at
rid
it.
of those two, that would put her right in line for the presidency. She could get in there, establish a socialist government. You know,
Oh yeah, no, I
I
don't
think
doubt
that's
that for
what
a
the
second.
impeachment was all about.
I agree. I mean, it was an open. I mean, now it's all coming out, and William Barr and his prosecutor John Durham is about to reveal. I hope, the fact that there was a literal conspiracy inside the government, with Obama having a big hand in it, to get rid of and overthrow the Trump presidency. I mean,
Right.
it's really becoming more obvious every minute, and you think, I mean, the left was railing for decades against the FBI of J. Edgar Hoover and the CIA and all the rest.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you can't hear a peep out of them when you see that all the stuff they were talking about has has become true. I mean, this FBI and these intelligence agencies, especially in the last few years of Obama, and the Department
Right.
of Justice, had completely gone off the rails in terms of usurping powers and spying on Americans
Oh
and
yeah. This.
engaging in espionage of all sorts. This is exactly what they had been talking about, and they were right. It is a danger, and here we
Right.
are. There's still we're
Yeah.
seeing how this can play out.
Right. But the reason why you don't hear a peep from them is because now the FBI and the CIA were involved in this leftist conspiracy. I hate to use
That's
conspiracy,
okay. They
but
I
it
would say
was.
I
But
call it a
that's exactly
conspiracy.
what it was.
I mean, it was it's interesting how the conspirators were the same people that cooked up this completely asinine
Stand by just
conspiracy
one.
theory.
What? What? Oh,
I like your
my
cat.
wife just said lunch is here, so
Oh,
that's
all
okay.
right.
That's why they have microwaves.
No, it's okay. I like your cat back there. Um,
Oh yeah, that's Bobby. She's
yeah.
my buddy.
Okay. No, listen, but just to get back, I mean, the they were while they were conspiring. It's a classic with the left, anyways. You have to look at what they're accusing, and you find out that's exactly what they are doing. I mean, it's classic projection. They had cooked up the most bizarre, most ridiculous conspiracy theory in my lifetime, which is that Donald Trump is a Russian spy. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine? I mean, and they pushed this for 3 years. It was obnoxious, and it was
And
wrong, and it was
it
dangerous.
was all fabricated.
Yes, it was. And we're now seeing the evidence of that. And I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it. We are going to see enough of it as things move forward. And the closer they get to it, the more crazy they're going to be. This is going to be one
Oh
of the
yeah.
ugliest elections that we've ever seen. It's just they're fighting for their life. I mean, they're scrapping. It's really, really nasty.
But the more that they uh, push their agenda, I think more Americans are seeing the they've drawn the curtains and they saw the wizard for
Yes,
what he
and
really
I
was.
think that we're seeing every day how Biden is up 10 points in the polls. We heard the same thing about Hillary, and
Right.
yet I think I saw today that the latest Gallup poll shows them neck and neck. So I don't think so.
No.
I don't. I think they've had their conspiracy against Trump as a spy. They had their perfect phone call, which they impeached him over. Then they had their use of the pandemic as a way to shut down the economy so they could take away the gains that we've made
Yeah.
unnecessarily. It was an
We can't,
overreaction.
and we can't forget the two porn stars who actually at another time had been candidates for office for the Democrat Party.
Oh my God. I remember when, getting these bulletins from the Boston Globe where I live, shocking bulletin. And I'd read it, Stormy Daniels said what? It's like, you're ready to have a nervous breakdown looking at this thing coming on my
Yeah,
phone. It's crazy. I mean, and I don't know, I don't know what they're going to come up with now. Of course, they're pushing a race war. Of course, we know that,
right. They're pushing
to
the race
divide, and
war.
that's predictable. I mean, you could have. I mean, I think they've already played the big hand on that one. I don't know if what else they can do. They've
Now they're
looted
they're
black.
trying to defund and
Oh yeah.
dissolve police departments, and I'm
Oh, that's a
thinking,
good one. Well,
well,
they've
that's
already looted black businesses and burned black buildings and killed
right.
black people. Yeah, can you imagine if there's no police? What'll happen to those neighborhoods?
Oh,
I mean, what do
yeah,
they care? They're all living in their nice, suburban communities, and where they don't worry about losing police protection. I mean, it's
right.
really bizarre, and I think that President Trump responded to this thing brilliantly. Of course, we're not going to hear about that in the media when he said, no, we don't want to defund the police. We want to add more money to the police so they can start to get social workers involved in going out and making sure that everything is done right. And we can start to have better training so we can avoid and weed out these bad cops, but reward the good cops and help them. I mean,
Right.
it's, is really the way to go instead of denigrating and using this language to tear down, our law enforcement and indirectly tear down the whole country. I
Yeah.
think people are going to see it. I think it's. I mean, from my lips to God's ear, I think there's going to be a landslide, and I think that
Oh,
President and the Democrats, it'll be like George McGovern. They're going to be in the wilderness for another 40 years before they purge their party of all these left wingers.
right. Um, what was I going to say now? My mind just went blank. Um, yeah, with all the shenanigans of Governor uh, Newsom in
Yes.
California
Sure.
and the governor in uh, Minnesota, the governor in Michigan, the governor in Kentucky, the uh,
New York,
yeah, and New York. I
New
can't
Jersey.
forget can't forget New York. They're really crazy up there.
Can't forget Massachusetts, my own home state, even though he's a
Yeah,
Republican technically.
yeah. They locked down everything. Okay,
Right.
that's fine. We were locked down in Utah, but at least we could go out and go grocery shopping as long as we wore a mask.
I
But
think that it's
California, they were arresting people who were just walking along the beach.
I
They
think
were
it's becoming
arresting,
more. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean
there
they were
was,
doing, and in Michigan they weren't allowed to travel in a car with more than one person. I think that
right,
it's becoming more obvious that the lockdown was overreach and unnecessary, especially now that the World Health Organization, after Trump cut off all funding to them, they're now trying to turn a leaf a little bit and maybe get back in to the good graces. They've now admitted that it's very, very rare for asymptomatic people to spread the virus. Now that's exactly why they had the shutdown, because of asymptomatic people.
right,
We had to help protect us. So if it's very rare that someone who's asymptomatic would spread the virus, there shouldn't have been a shutdown. Now that doesn't mean there shouldn't be social distancing during a virus, and people need to take very big precautions. But if it's really a matter of asymptomatic, then you isolate people who are at risk, and you keep people who have the virus, at home, and or so they can get better. You don't
right.
shut down an entire economy.
You quarantine the sick people. That's what the whole quarantine is about. Is you quarantine the sick so that the others can go about their daily affairs.
That's right, exactly.
But they did it
But this
all
thing was it was an
back-assed.
overreaction, and I think that it's also fueled by the WHO originally hiding the fact that there even was a virus for
Right,
several weeks while the thing spread all over the world. There's a
right.
lot of
And the,
criminality here.
yeah, and the Chinese. I saw
Exactly.
a headline
Yeah.
yesterday where Iran is resuming everything as normal, and I thought, I didn't know they were locked down. I
Well,
didn't
no,
know
they
that
they
Iran.
actually had a big. They were hit heavily. Um, I know that Israel has resumed normally, and
Right,
there was a minor outbreak in one community, so they isolated that one little area.
right,
But other than that, everyone else has gone back to normal, and that's what you do. I mean, that seems to me, to be the appropriate approach.
right.
Not this
And,
entire shutdown where you have Governor Whitmer. And by the way, talk about hypocrisy. They're ready to
right,
railing with rage at people who were annoyed at the lockdown and who came from parts of the state that had no virus. And, oh, these people, and
right,
and yet when the protests after the killing of George Floyd, she's out there protesting with everyone else, not even
right.
wearing a mask. So I
Well,
mean, talk about
even our own Senator Romney,
oh
Mitt
my God,
Romney,
what is
was
the
out
deal? What's the deal with Mitt
protesting.
Romney? I mean, he was governor of Massachusetts. Now he's senator from Utah. I mean, he voted to impeach President Trump.
Right.
What's the deal with him?
He well, I think he was the ambassador for one president to China. He was an ambassador to Russia with another president. I think he got brainwashed when he was over there. So now that
Yeah.
he comes back to the States, he votes more for Democrats' policies than he does for Republican. So if he wants to be a Democrat, he needs to just let everybody know that I'm switching parties. I'm no
My the,
longer
my
Republican.
my theory on Mitt Romney, and I don't mean to sound harsh here, and I don't like to do armchair psychologizing, but I think he's just so bitter over having lost twice
Right,
the presidential election, especially against Obama the second time, and Obama was a very weak candidate, and he still choked, and he completely lost.
right.
And then you have Trump come along, who's never held office, didn't spend much money, and he steps in and he wins. I just think Mitt Romney's bitter. I think
Yeah,
that's
I
what it.
think that's a part of it too.
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean
that's
that's
a
what I
part of
see.
it too.
It's like,
Yeah,
how dare he do this? This is, you know,
yeah,
it's like, and then he, of course, Trump didn't help matters when he humiliated him publicly by calling him in for a dinner to talk about being Secretary of State and then saying no, thank you. I mean, it's
right.
just, Trump sometimes can hurt himself in those ways. I mean, like
Yeah,
he shouldn't have insulted Senator McCain the way he did, because
right,
then McCain came out and out of pure spite voted against the health care bill, just because he didn't want
right.
Trump to have a victory. So sometimes Trump can step on
Yeah,
his
he
own
can.
progress. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
criticism of mine.
yeah. Trump can, but in spite of his haircut, in spite of the way he talks and acts in public, which you know he's not a polished politician, and that's
Right.
what I like about him.
Me
And
too.
sometimes he is going to say things that hurts people's feelings, so to speak.
Right.
But he generally speaks the truth.
Yeah. Usually, what he has to say eventually, becomes true. It becomes obvious. And
Right,
you're right. I mean, I usually find that his comments I trust them, and because they usually turn out to be true. Not
right.
always, but most of the time. And the
Yeah,
fact
I'd
that
say
he does,
90% of the time.
I agree. And the
Yeah,
fact that he uses Twitter absolutely drives them nuts because he doesn't have to
right,
go through the filter of his enemies. He can go right directly to the people, and he has something like 4 million Twitter followers. And
right,
they can't stop him. I mean, I think that he even used one of my tweets the other day because I tweet him directly when I pointed out that the kneeling at football games and whatnot. I said I don't kneel to anyone because it's against my religion as a Jew. I mean, for example, in the book of Esther, Mordecai says to the representative of the king, the emperor, when he was commanded to kneel, he goes, "I don't kneel to anyone but God." And
Right.
so it's against my religion to kneel to any person other than the Lord our God, the Almighty. And
Right.
I tweeted this out to Trump, and the next day he sent out a tweet saying, "Don't kneel to anyone but God." So
Oh yeah.
I
Well, I
think I
feel
might
the
have had a
same
little
way.
tiny. Oh yeah, but I think I might have played a little tiny role because I got that tweet to him immediately upon his tweet. I have it set up that way. I think he did read that. I understand he does read his tweets. So yes, I
Yeah.
mean I don't. It's not that I'm denying the fact that there's racism in this country. I certainly think there is, and we could talk about the leftist policies that have exacerbated racism. But at the
Exactly.
same time, I, as an American, do not bow. It's just not
I don't.
American.
I don't bow
Yeah,
to any king. I don't kneel for any cause. Uh, like you said, I kneel to my God, but I salute the flag.
that's right. Me
And
too.
that drives the left crazy when people say that.
Well, they love subservience and they want to see. That's why they're into. You can't step out of the house without this mask on. I mean, it's very subservient. And the further
Right.
left, the mask becomes a political symbol, even a religious symbol for some
Uh
people.
huh.
I mean, this whole shutdown, they love it.
Yeah,
It's like complete control, and
exactly.
it's really unnecessary, and I would argue actually unhealthy. But
Right.
I mean, it's just where they are. I mean, I think it's going to backfire. I
Well,
hope.
I think it's backfiring already. You see, a lot of blacks are leaving the Democrat Party because for the first time, they finally see that they've been useful idiots.
Yeah, a lot of them are also buying guns, by the way, mainly because
Exactly.
they're afraid they're going to start defunding the police. They better start getting ready to defend themselves.
If exactly.
So, I
Ex-
mean, the whole rotten mess is, I think, backfiring on them. Meanwhile, there's this little scandal brewing in New York State, in Alexandria Cortez's district. There's this hospital, Elmhurst Hospital. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I might get kicked off of YouTube, but let's just say that someone should look at what's going on in that hospital in terms of people dying and why. That's all.
uh-huh.
We'll leave it at that. But these things I think will all be investigated eventually and
Right.
exposed, and justice will be done.
In fact,
Any
the next book that I'm working on, I'm doing research for is on the Obama Gate, and
Excellent.
so when I finish, I'll
Keep
let you
me
know.
Yeah, keep me up to date on it. Let's do some programming on it. It's a
Okay.
huge and it's a very complex subject. It's one of these things that you have to put together a whole pie chart showing
Right.
who's doing what with who. I
Yeah.
think that Epoch magazine or newspaper has done a pretty good job of putting together a full poster wall chart showing all of the
Oh
conspirators,
yes, yes, I saw
going
that.
way back. Yeah, so check out Epoch News for that. Anyway,
Yeah.
John, but listen, I mean, you're doing some good work there. You post articles and papers and books on academia.edu, which is an excellent site. And I really appreciate what you're doing there. I appreciate your work.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. I will talk to you soon. And John Lemon, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay. Good talking to you.
All right. Have a good afternoon. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Bye, Charles.
All right. Bye bye.